Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of our Artists and Conversation series, Material Meditations. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is a series of live conversations Gajah Gallery is hosting, where we pair two artists who form very distinct, different practices, but they have certain overlaps, either in their backgrounds. Like, for instance, we had Fika and Erizal for our first edition. Erizal asked if Fika Rios and Fika, or in their stages in their careers or their artistic approaches. So joining us today are two very promising emerging artists, Kayleigh Goh and Mahalakshmi Kannappan. They will be speaking about their unique relationships to the materials in their practices, how it's helped them make sense of their worlds and provided them an endless source of curiosity and wonder. So before I introduce them, I just want to give a brief background on the gallery for those joining us today. So since 1996, Gajah Gallery has been a pioneering body in the Southeast Asian art scene, representing a portfolio of the region's leading artists, as well as engaging the brightest emerging talents in contemporary art today, like Maha and Kayleigh. In 2012, we opened the Jogja Art Lab in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, as an experimental production platform for artists to come together and produce works across various mediums. So Yao has worked with artists like Ashley Bickerton, Unizar, Suzanne Victor, and even Kayleigh Goh, who is joining us today again. And currently on view in our Singapore space is the final week for our exhibition 25. It's our celebratory show for our 25th anniversary, which we celebrate this year. And for that show, we're featuring artists we've worked with for the past quarter century. In our Jogja space, we have on view the group show In Our Image, After Our Likeness, a show featuring emerging artists in Southeast Asia exploring figurative art. And next month, we're proud and so thrilled to open a major show on the pioneering Balinese artist, Igusti Ayu Kadek Murniasi. So do watch out for our announcements for that on our social media and our newsletters. Okay, before we start, I'd like to remind audiences that we're opening up a Q&A portion with audiences for the last 10 minutes of the talk. So if you have any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat box in this Zoom call. Like you can see in the bottom of the Zoom call, there's like an option to chat. So you can just put your questions in there. Okay. Now I'm very, very pleased to introduce you to our guest artists for the day. So just a brief background on our Gajah's history with them. So our relationships with them began when they joined our annual New Now exhibit. So for those who don't know, it's our group show where we highlight young and emerging artists usually based in Singapore. So Kayleigh joined our first edition of that show back in 2017. And Maha joined our 2019 edition. And then coincidentally, one year after each of their editions of New Now, we staged their first solo show in our Singapore space. So Kayleigh's show in 2018 was And Yet If Only. And Maha's first solo show was just last year in 2020 called Singular Moments. And now I don't want to go on any longer because we'd like to hear from the artists themselves, just to briefly introduce their backgrounds and their general practice. Then after that we'll learn more. So could we start with Kayleigh?
Hi everybody, I'm Kayleigh and I'm born in Malaysia, Johor Bahru, but then I live in between Johor Bahru and Singapore for a time being when I was studying my BA with LaSalle, and currently I am based in Melbourne doing my master's in contemporary arts with BCA Uni Melbourne. Yeah, and I'll pass to Maha.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Mahalakshmi Kannappan. I'm basically from India, but I got settled here, moved to Singapore following my marriage. And my art career started after I enrolled myself in NAFA school, and ever since then, that was in 2015. So after that, my journey in the art world started. Yeah. So I was represented by Gajah, as Nicole told me. Yes.
Thank you so much for that, Kayleigh and Maha. Okay, now we'd like to move on to like the conversation where we can go more in depth in both your practices.
Yes.
So I'd like to start from the beginning. Like both of you are definitely at the emerging stages of your career. But you definitely have grown so much since even like your first group shows in you now. But you've built your foundations, establishing sort of like a signature medium. So for instance, with Kayleigh, it's cement on wood, and with Maha, it's charcoal. So obviously, this signature medium could always change, but could you kind of share, both of you, like the origins of how you first encountered like these materials? How did it feel? What was the experience like? And the experience of kind of discovering their artistic possibilities.
For me, at a point of time, I was really living in a lot of tension and stress, because I was still trying to figure out what I want to do with my practice, and also like the switching of like from Chinese education background to a whole English education system. And then I encountered a space which is I encountered this huge gray wall in a space that time sort of calms me down a lot. And then I just grew an attraction to the color gray and the textures on the wall. And so I did my research and found the Japanese artist Tado Ando. And then from then on, I was thinking how I could sort of like firstly recreate this feeling I get with that encounter with that gray wall through really finding out if I can really use cement as a painting medium, or like or using it to cast something or to create that tactile quality. And then but at a point of time I don't even know where to buy the material. So I sort of remembering asking my dad about it, because my dad he works a bit with the with construction stuff as well. So so he kind of stole a bit of his work of cement from his workplace and passed it to me. So it's like a small bag, and I was kind of afraid actually, because I Google and it says it's harmful for your skin and harmful for your eye, and then I am kind of lazy to do all the research on how I should like protect myself or to use this material. But I went on. I went ahead to use it anyways, and it's really bad. So it's not a good example. But yeah, and initially I just mixed it with water, but it didn't work out because it doesn't bind the material with the wood. But then after understanding like how paint is essentially like powdered pigments with binder, and then I sort of try experimenting with different binders to hold the powdered cement together and do more of the experiments, and manage to find a way to use the powdered cement in a very painterly way. So this is sort of how I started to use it as paint, like
So
a
it was
textured paint.
it was
Yeah,
all like
sorry.
self-taught on your, like did you have someone, like maybe another artist who showed you, or it was all like you learned all about on your own, how to mix and everything?
Yeah, but it's like a very play kind of way to, yeah,
It's like experimenting.
yeah, experimenting. Yeah, but with health risk of, and then because I got scolded by my workshop lecturer here, saying that I wasn't using the material right, and I should like have all this like mass on and all the protection gears on if I want to use the material. So yeah.
Oh God. Well, I think now you've learned.
I already inhaled quite a bit, but I think it should be fine. It's not like a huge amount. It's just like, yeah.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay.
Good thing that person told you. How about you, Maha?
Yeah, for me, charcoal, like, I when I was in NAFA, I had this module called material exploration. So that's when I was like, before that, I was only drawn to oil painting and stuff like that. Painting. I was mostly into painting. Then I had to experiment with the material. So that was my given criteria at that time. So then. So I always used to use charcoal as a dry medium, it's like a drawing tool. So I always carry this powder because I use as a graphite pencil and also as a powder. So actually, so when I use that powder on a different material, right? What happened was it was tactile, but yet was not binding with the material that I used on, like the base. So I was thinking, how else can I, do the experiment? So I started mixing like how Kayleigh did. Like I started mixing with water, and some binders like glue and stuff like that. So what happened was when I did this, there was this thing that the results that I did. I did experiments before with other materials before charcoal, but then when I did with charcoal, the same kind of application, and I was amazed by how the effects or the unpredictability of that material. Every time I mix and I lay it out, the next time next day it's totally different. So I it's like what you see is not what you get. So this kind of thing I really enjoyed doing more and more. So I wanted to explore and expand. So it's like knowing the unknown kind of a thing. And also every time I do the experiments, so I get different tones and different hues, all within one material. So this made me explore more and expand on it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yes.
you just mentioned that before charcoal, you were actually working with other mediums.
Yes.
You were with
Yes.
oil. I wanted to know, how about Kayleigh? Did you also have other mediums that you felt more comfortable with before you discovered cement?
Mainly painting, because I chose painting as like major.
Okay, so both
field.
of you were kind of like painters.
Yeah, from paint, like always think from a more painter sort of viewpoint. Yeah.
And Maha, when you were experimenting, like Kayleigh, also all self-taught, did you have like someone like guiding you, like, oh, this is the right thing to mix with this, all experimenting on your end, right?
No, but there was there was no guidance, or I didn't see the formula for mixing it or anything. No, it was just purely experimenting one after the other binders. But then what happened was my lecturer then he told me that after I did a series of experiments, and he pinpointed on one thing that is in the slides. So he pinpointed on that one thing, and he told me that there's possibility in this. So you can do more in this direction. So he actually guided me to that direction. Then from then on, so so the experiment wise I did on my own, but there's this word that he told me, maybe there's a possibility there. Yeah, pushed me towards that direction. So yeah.
That's nice. Like scientists.
Yes.
So now that we're talking about your materials, I'd like to know kind of, because your works, if you look at like even the 2017 on both your ends, the early works and until now, you can definitely see like a distinct thread. It's very recognizable that it's yours for both of you. But they're also like, you also subtly add different changes over time. Like with Kayleigh, I noticed you add more materials, especially now, like in Melbourne, you started adding like found materials like rocks and city debris on, and it affects the way, like the aesthetics of your work as well, in subtle ways. And with Maha, you stay with charcoal, but like I remember seeing a work of yours, I think it was a 2017, the on paper one. It was very flat. And now it's like very textural over the years. So I want to know how sort of the evolution of your relationship with the materials as like you grew as artists over the past 2-3 years.
Okay.
Everyone.
For me, like adding like new elements to like new material elements to my work is because like every time I go to a new place, like other than Melbourne, like I did visited like residency in Kyoto, Itoshima as well, Fukuoka. But like new places, like whenever I feel visiting new places, feel sort of like try to pick up something from like learning something new about that new places or like new experience. So for me, it's like when I first came to Melbourne, it was like just 2 weeks, but after I reached, it went to total lockdown, and then so there's this desire to really want to pick up something, but you couldn't, and then so everything that I sort of forage, like the materials, are within that restriction of like, okay, you can only go up for within like 5 kilometers and 2 hours of exercise time, if I remember it correctly. Yeah, so it's I think every new places that I go, I try to literally pick up new elements to work with, like, so it's in a sense the materials sort of help me grow, because you have to find ways to allow the material to work with your existing practice. It can't just like stuck something on it. And so I sort of learn, I'm sort of learning and being taught by the materials, and my mind just went blank. What was the question again? How
It's kind of like how your relationship with the material has evolved over time, but it kind of
yeah. So it's like a constant the constant idea of rebalancing. Like you, like say I'm from a Chinese background, my family Chinese, and then I first go to Singapore, I have to pick up new things and rebalance my whole idea on how I think about the world, my identity. Like even though you don't take everything in, you will sort of filter through the new elements into it and rebalance. So I sort of think like how I think of this way in my practice as well. Like I have like concrete and wood is that thing I already have like a foundational home, like a home page to our phone, and then you sort of explore out, and then you find something that interests you and trying to fit new knowledge, new ideas into what you already have. And there's a constant act of rebalancing, finding a balance between your existing knowledge of the world and the new perspective that comes in. And the practice just grows in this way. So it's a very natural progression. It's not like a cut and jumping into something totally different. It's more like a gradual process.
Yeah. It's like the cement.
If it makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. It's like the core, and then the other materials are like
coming in and some going out, and then another project comes in, like so some elements fade away and some new elements came in, sort of. So each project has like has a main thing that I'm interested in to sort of focus on, but then the main basic unit is concrete and wood, cement and wood.
Like I remember when I was reading about your last digital show, which we'll talk about later, but I'm getting ahead of myself, but I said this thing about listening to the voices of objects, which I found so interesting. It's like you realize they also have like a kind of life on its own. Because they're not like alive. But yeah, sorry. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. How about you, Maha?
Yeah, for me, right, these working with materials, I'm basically a person driven, like, inward driven. So I don't think the external environment influences the works that I do. There is no so much of influence in my work. So what I primarily, I feel within. So in my earlier works, actually, you can see how following my moving from India to Singapore. So there's this the emotion that I wanted to immediately, pour it on something. So then I found this material, which is so apt. I thought I use charcoal as an avenue to, show these emotions. So which, because now later we can talk about how I connect the feelings or the emotions with this charcoal. So initially it's like that, so the very the characteristics or the properties of this material was in line with how I felt that time. So that's how I use the charcoal in my earlier works. But over time, right, so I wanted to see charcoal as a material, as for what it is, rather than finding the emotional part of it. So not as a medium to express the emotions, you see. So for example, in singular moments, if you have seen my works, it's a collection of visuals, that was etched in my mind over time. And so I wanted to, since earlier days, how it was in my mind. And these visuals, I wanted to give it a form, for these visuals. So that's how my works over time progressed. So visuals, like for example, it could be a scratch on a car, and a mark on the wall or crack on the door, that I've been living for a long time with those visuals around me when I was in India. Then so these evoke certain memories, right? So this visual thing is what I wanted to express in these materials. Yeah,
Wow.
so this is how my journey has come so far, starting from expressing the emotions to now looking at the material as it is. And yeah.
You have a really good memory. Like, because I know you've been in Singapore for 11 years, but you still have
Yes.
the images of surfaces from when you were in India are
Yes.
still in your mind.
Yeah.
So that's really,
So that's how the impact of those visuals, which never leaves you. So yeah, so but more than that now, my interest is on layering or intermingling the textures of any material, for that fact. Yeah, so, and also slowly transforming into 3D.
yeah. Your last show had sculptures.
Yes.
So I just had this brief question when you talked about the images of the surfaces. I wanted to know, like, because you remember them, was there a certain story attached to those images that you remember in your head, or were they just kind of random images that come to you?
Yeah, so in this particular last exhibition, so I had this particular incident that always flashes in my mind. That's about the scratch in a car. I've been telling everybody, those who are listening could have heard it from me when I was in that exhibition. So it's a story about a random boys scratching on the cars that is parked on the roads, like on the pavements. So these boys, it's so they just walk on the street and then they scratch randomly on the cars. So when we come down and see our cars are all fully scratched, so this particular incident, I mean, has nothing to do with me because it wasn't my car also. But when I go down, I happen to see this image, and I always have this thought, why and how, who is doing this, and sometimes you witness the boys doing that. Yeah, so this visual, I don't know how it affected me, but it stayed with me.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah, its memory works funny that way.
yes.
And both of
Yeah,
you,
every time I see cars here, but I closely take a look at all the cars when I'm walking towards the MRT or somewhere. I will see for any scratches on the cars that is parked here. But
yeah,
I mean, I've never found one unless it's like really badly banged onto something else. Otherwise, there's no intentional scratch on the cars here. So these are the differences, between like living between two worlds. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's great that you mentioned that because that kind of connects to another question because you both kind of touched on it already, but it's you both have very different experiences and come from different backgrounds. But something I noticed, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but something you have kind of similar is that feeling of living between two worlds. Like Maha, like you've mentioned this in interviews before, how you and just now the experience of relating to different cultures and lifestyles from your big move from India to Singapore. And then Kayleigh, I know that you have been living between Johor Bahru and Singapore since the beginning of your college years, if I'm not mistaken. And then now you're living in Melbourne. And I know like for both of you, it's a challenge to always adjust. I think for anyone, but it's also, you both seem to have this, you're very attuned to your surroundings and your environment, or at least that's how I see it. And it reflects in your work in very different, unique ways. So if you can expound, because you both kind of touched on it already, but we'd like to go deeper on how your relationship to places, either past or current, have kind of affected your practice, or even vice versa. Yeah.
Okay, Katie.
Yeah, because I sort of answered it from with my last.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Really.
Yeah, I will kind of rephrase it in another way and add on to it, because like so Johor Bahru and Singapore will always feel like the experience then was always like trying to balance that feeling, because it's like just one bridge across the two cities. So like because I did travel daily, so it always feel like sort of living like a parallel world, even though I know a lot of the culture, the feeling is very similar, like the food, like the people, and a lot of people would like from Johor will go to Singapore for work, and Singaporeans will visit, and like there's a lot of crossover. So it's actually at the same time very similar, but at the same time very different as well, I would feel. And but both, I sort of see it as like both grounding points for, because both is where I started my art practice at. But I think because of like traveling in between, the sense of again, the word rebalancing, balancing is always there, like the feeling. So a lot of my works is about finding composition that feels balanced. So like adding another shape here, adding another gradient here to rebalance the whole work into a balanced composition, the lines sort of. Yeah. And I forgot the question again.
No, it's okay. You answered it perfectly about
And now also maybe the difference of like now and Melbourne. So Melbourne for me feels more like because there's a lot of diversity here, and I see because also I read about Kishu's Kurokawa theory, metabolism movement, and I picked up the main things from the readings was two keywords: unit and structure, like how the formation of a city can be like even like a building can be seen like as a formation of units and structures. So if you change the units, they can be adaptive to different environment. And because of also like city living and COVID, all these keywords kept coming up, like being adaptive enough in this contemporary times, like everything is so fast, being adaptive, being constantly changing, to pick up skills that can be in units, like to do things in units, so it can adapt to a lot of things in a very fast way. For me, if I kept having this feeling of needing to find units and structure in things. So that's why from all the larger works, the larger painting works has shifted into more spatial installation works. So I do a lot of smaller units of smaller paintings, and when they are formed into a spatial installation, I see them as forming into a bigger painting. So whenever I want this, because if I want to shift a very huge painting somewhere, it's very hard, like transportation wise.
Yeah.
So if I want to shift like a big, impactful, like visual work, I want them to be adaptive. So if they are in smaller units, they can be taken down, packed, and reformed into different spaces and become a new larger spatial installation. So it's being very adaptive in this sense. So that's why there's like this change of from a lot bigger works into smaller units, but groups of works in that sense. And yeah.
Oh, so interesting. So even your big works are very malleable. You can like remove, you can like choose to remove one part, like you show it in this space and it could look different in another space, but it's
so
same work.
Yeah. So in a sense, you can say like the space itself is a canvas, but the smaller paintings is the shape, the lines, the color used to paint different sites. So each installation is a painting, but then now the colors, the shapes, the lines is now removable.
Yeah.
So say if I present an installation here, I can take everything down and present it in another setting, but it will feel very different because all this will readapt to a new environment. So I'm interested in the idea of how we can live more being to sort of cultivate this ability to being adaptive to different environment, as long as we have this different units of things we cultivate in ourselves, and we would be adaptive to different environments, sort of way of thinking. Yeah.
Strokes and yeah. All okay. That's very interesting. How about you, Ma?
So for me, this whole migration thing, adapting to it, but it's definitely there was turbulence and varied emotions. For me, it's not just going to another country to learn, or it's not in the notion that I will go back to my own country after a while. So it's never like that. For me, it's like relocating completely. I am leaving behind everything that I had. So it's a conscious decision. Okay, it's not a forced decision, but yet there's this so there's this cultural differences, the differences in the lingos that they use here. So in a conversation when all the friends are having here, we kind of I kind of I always felt slightly alienated, because I wasn't able to actively participate in the conversation because of certain things that they refer to is not what I understand. You see, so because so that's how. So on an emotional level, yeah, I had a bit of varied emotions here and there during the time. So I think this is where my source of the primary source of my emotions that I showed in my works, especially in the In-Betweenness and the Decipher series, where I have shown how the turbulence or the fragility because of this turbulence, how it has affected me. All these things were like immediately poured onto the work when I was given the opportunity. On a physical change, like the environment wise, I think here viewing concretes wherever you go is a big change for me. Although I was not from a rural area, but it's still the physical change. This is the physical change, but I got adapted to it. It did not affect me so much. Yeah. But for as an artist, I only developed my art after coming to Singapore. So I never had, I mean, art was only a hobby to me when I was in India. Although I had the great interest in art, but I dived deep only after coming to NAFA. In fact, even before NAFA also, I wasn't sure whether I'm going to go in that direction. So my first set of feelings about this migration was already shown, and I think I'm over that now. So I'm already adapted to the situation here now. I think to the limited spaces here or things like that.
I'm glad you you seem to both have adapted pretty well, and I do feel that sense of balance, and the tension, like the balance of tension and balance in both your works.
Yes.
So Kayleigh, you mentioned that you moved to Melbourne, and then just a few weeks in, it was already locked down, or it was like the pandemic, and it kind of limited the way, like where you would go, or at least there was some distance, if I'm not mistaken, constraints.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to get into this because I guess it's being asked everywhere in all interviews, but I felt it's quite relevant to you both because you both staged solo shows during the pandemic, especially like towards the end of the year. And like Kayleigh, yours was a digital show, Soft Whispers of the City. And Maha, yours was the Singular Moments one, the one in which we were already talking about. And I just want to know, what was it like staging these shows during this time? From the process of creating works to staging the show itself. Like, did it limit or expand your processes or your access to things in any way? Your access to materials or to inspirations, or like what Kayleigh was touching on earlier, the places, or did it provide a sense of challenge or fruitfulness for you guys?
I think for me, I do feel limitation sometimes helps creativity, because when there's too many options out there, I will just be distracted and unsure. Oh, there's so many things I want to do. It's not just like limitation of like what I can do, but also like so like for materials, like if I focus just on wood and cement, and that limitation of these two things could force creativity out of it. So like they say, like it's good to let your child be bored sometimes so they can sort of prompt their imagination, or so it's actually not too bad, I think. It's kind of good, like so the limitation then sort of like creating this guideline, like how I could work with a project. So I could only travel so far, I could only use what materials I have with me. So it already gave me the so if I want to go out of like the space, because the first Instagram show is within my room. I want to limit myself inside of my bedroom. So the second show was within that 5 kilometer out of my room. And so like collecting the materials within this 5 kilometer, and to and also because like there's a limitation of presenting the final work, it sort of forces me to consider digital platform. Like I think a lot of like what we are doing now, like even the talks are in digital. And yeah, so I don't think it's a bad thing for me personally. It just sort of create like a guideline for me to have fun with what I can do and what I cannot do, sort of feeling.
The blueprint.
Yeah, and also because limitation, because the idea of limitation kept pushing me to think about the ideas of being like the keywords I mentioned: adaptability, portability, and that now I'm very interested in. So I continue to read on like theories that is like nomadic theories that's more about this lineage of thinking. Yeah, so it sort of guide me in my practice as well. Limitation, yeah.
Yeah, like in your digital show, I noticed there was like the boundary between. It's interesting that you mentioned that 5 kilometers outside, because I felt that the boundary between the indoor and the outdoor in some works were kind of blurred in the solo show, at least from how I like saw it, compared to some of your earlier works, which were like a lot of them were indoors. Like indoor architectural spaces. Some of the ones in the digital shows, like I wouldn't know if it's indoor or outdoor. So, yeah.
Because of the reflection, I think.
Maybe.
Like, playing with the reflection, and yeah, I think the difference between like a digital and the physical presentation, the final presentation, was that because I do spatial installation, so I think in 3D space as a final presentation, but then the digital one is a 2D space. It's actually sort of the same. It's like I produce units of works and then I organize, like make a painting out of it. So the Instagram show is sort of like the Instagram is the canvas, and documenting the actual works, putting them inside of the Instagram is sort of like painting the Instagram. So the approach is the same. It's just the format is different.
Yeah.
But it's good because it's like a new way of doing it. If it's not about if it's not because of limitation, I wouldn't have like tried doing
that's
that.
true. That's very true. And we wouldn't have been able to do this show, this talk with both of you if it were physical.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you, Maha?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like Kayleigh said, I mean, personally, I don't have, because of this limitation, like you cannot go out, you need to be, inspired to do your work only when you go out. I don't have that limitation. I mean, I did not find that was having any problem with that, but because my solo show was initially finalized just before the COVID. Then we were about to do the solo show on the October, and then sourcing my material was the biggest problem because of this COVID situation. Otherwise, yeah. Because before this sourcing from India, I used to ground my charcoal myself and to the finest form, and then from there I do my works. But then for this particular show, I intended to have a bit more finest powder. So for that, I had to source from India. And then that time it was there was no flights everywhere, and I can only source my material, ship it to Singapore, and then the shipping took like so many months, and so we had to postpone our show from October to December. So that affected me quite a bit, and yeah. But otherwise, of course, there is this lack of inspiration when not being able to meet people. It's not a direct inspiration of how you do your work, but it is definitely a motivation, to keep yourself like the brain just is being active, when you meet people and talk to them. So
Yeah,
there was this a bit slow down on that part, but yeah.
all of us.
uh, yes, that generally it happens to everyone, not only the artists, it happens to everyone. But and for the digital, and I was seeing more and more of digital exhibitions
Mhm.
online. But I was slightly in the fear that, how am I going to present my works on a digital platform, because for my works, I thought that physical presence is much needed, to in order to view the works, or even feel the tactile nature of it.
Yeah,
I wasn't imagining how to I was in the slightest fear that what if my solo show is going to become an online show.
mm,
I was in that fear, but then, but moving forward as an artist, and how things are going to change in the future, I think I will have to find a way how to present the works online, rather than changing the works according to that. Uh, yeah, so
yeah.
that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you for that. But I feel like with the way you both started your career was a lot of it was, I mean, your artistic career was a lot of it was experimentation, and you both looking to the future. I can see you both doing that as things, even as external environments change and circumstances change. Um,
Yes, yes.
so we're actually approaching our last 10 minutes. It was so fast. But
Yeah,
I'd like to also ask questions that were sent beforehand, if that's okay with you guys.
yeah, sure,
Um,
sure.
okay, there's this one. This is a good one. Um, for both of you, there seems to
Oh.
be an element of minimalism in both of your works. Could the minimalistic approach be reflected as a process to essentialize and focus on the purity of one aesthetic aspect, like focusing on the monochromatic or to accentuate form and texture, or is it just your preferred aesthetic
Mm-mm.
aspect of minimalism? If I may
Yeah.
add, like, would you could do you see yourself continuing that in the future? Sorry, there.
So the question is whether minimalism is seen as an aesthetic approach, or what was the question exactly?
Yeah, is the approach a process, like
Mm.
is the approach of minimalism on a process to essentialize or to focus on, for instance, like the purity of, I think, your material or the form,
Uh,
or the purity of like an aesthetic aspect, like the
yeah,
form or the
okay.
texture, or is it really just like your preferred aesthetic minimalism, or do you have like intentional, if I understood the question, an intentional reason for that?
uh, okay. Can I go for that, Kayleigh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So for me, if I get the question correct, okay. Yeah, I think for me, exploring the material and allowing the material to react in its own way. And it's like confronting the unknown is what matters. Then of course the visual aesthetic is very important, but so that's not the direction that I will be going, but rather, stimulating this material and allowing it to react is what more interests me. So that is the direction that I will be going.
Yeah.
Hmm. I don't know if I've answered correctly to the
No,
question.
no, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
for me, it's a conscious choice and it's intentional because I really want the focus to be on the material the sense of encountering the material itself. I don't want a lot of different distraction to take away the attention. So like say if today you take away some part of your senses, say like if you can't see now, you can your hearing senses will be enhanced. So like if you take away other stuff, a focus focal point will be sort of amplified or enhanced. So I want more of the focus is on the tactility of the material, both for cement and wood. But then like when I develop, I see I add in new elements. So I see like even I add element to it. It's just like most of the time one singular color or one singular specific element, new element to it. So other than the wood and cement, the focus would be just that the purity of that one single say the plant pigment in that space. So creating a whole space just to cater to a focus of that singular plant pigment in that painting.
Like that.
Yeah.
It really stands out because of that intention.
Yeah.
I like that metaphor of like when you can't see, your hearing gets more heightened, right? And that's for both your works in that sense. Because like with Maha as well, the lack of color really puts focus on the texture. And I think we have room for like one more question. Time for one more question. But like if the audience would like to send in as well, just a reminder, we can maybe accommodate like one more after this one. So, but yeah, we had like a couple more that came in beforehand. Okay. This is about your studio space. So being young artists practicing in Singapore, although even like Kayleigh, you've experienced that. And availability of studio space might be a concern, especially for creating larger pieces. Although you kind of touched on this a little earlier, Kayleigh, on the creating smaller works. But I don't know if this is also in Singapore, if you experience this as well in Singapore. What is your strategy to create a space conducive for art making? And how was your transition from school studio space to your personal studio space?
Me first? I can sort of answer this in a Melbourne situation because I do have like a studio space in school and a living room studio space here. So I try to focus. What's the question again? How do I
so the transition from your particularly in Singapore, where it's kind of challenging to create like a studio space, especially for larger works. How did you kind of, I think more generally, how did you create space conducive for art making? And if it's related, how did you transition from your school studio space to your personal studio space? Or if there was a transition?
Yeah, I think like I mentioned previously, because I don't really have enough space now. So I just think in terms of making a lot of units of things. And when I get a chance to have a bigger space, I could just bring them out all together to create that larger formation. So it's a larger work together as an assemblage of units of painting. And then, cool.
For me, I just mentioned to you like before this talk, we were talking about how I'm looking for a space. So it is definitely a difficult situation in Singapore, finding a space. And I would say when I was in NAFA, I think I had a bigger space than I am currently having. So
wow.
So it was quite big. In fact, because I was messing the whole place, so they gave me one whole balcony outside, and nobody cared to come out and see what I'm doing. So it was like, so I had this whole space all for myself. Yeah, but now I'm struggling to find one. But yes, yeah, but of course, the Singapore art community, they have a lot of openings, like Telequaro, is it? That one, Goodman Art Center, all they are opening up for spaces, studio spaces, but it's a bit difficult to get though. Yeah, but there are opportunities. Mm.
Okay, we have a few more that are coming in from the audience right
Oh,
now. So, okay, I have this one. Um,
I'm
okay,
actually looking at a question here, Q&A, is it? Like in that, so there's two questions
yes,
actually
it's
by
a
the same
question.
person.
We can start with the first one. So the fascinated by them, I'll just read it out loud. Fascinated by from Nguyen Kiang
Mm,
Lo.
yeah.
Fascinated by the material used by both artists. What other
Mm.
new material can both of you are experimenting now and in the future? Or if there's maybe something you're also looking into in the future, since you both touched on what you're experimenting with now.
Yeah. For me, currently I'm only using charcoal. I'm only experimenting on that. Although I wanted to, like, if not for COVID, I would have gone to India to do, on ceramics. So I wanted to, include that material along with this material. I want to see how both reacts and what happens when it is when you provide the stimulus. Yeah, but because I didn't get the opportunity to go to India, so I am sticking with charcoal for now. But in the future, I probably will be using ceramics or the pottery material.
Mm,
Mm.
ceramics.
I had a I had a glimpse of the second question as well. Like, have you ever considered how light interact with your materials?
Feel free to answer.
Because
Ah,
yeah, because it sort of relate. Last year I did experiment using glass and mirror. So all of them are smaller works, and I am thinking of further pushing them into larger works because I am really interested in how the reflection, perception, all these ideas work around each other. And I do also like the idea of how Ken Gokuma mentioned how shadow, like because light interacts and when there's form that they create shadow, like there's spirit in shadow. So I really I started creating more sculptural spatial installation work is to also play with the idea of having shadow and light as part of the work, so there's spirit in the work as well.
Like real shadows and shadows
Because
as well.
when they move, they also sort of create different casting. They are moving, they are alive. Yeah.
That is very true. Light can sometimes be a big aspect of your work,
yes, yes, yeah.
in the time of day as well.
And the wood and cement is just actually like a stage. It's sort of like I want to create the empty space, empty stage to allow these subtleties of like light, shadows, or other materials to appear. I like how grayness always help other colors to shine rather than being the spotlight itself. So I like to see the paintings as the supportive role to allow other elements to come up.
Organic.
Yeah, so it's like some more of like an open-ended. It's not like I'm painting about something. It's more like painting about a space to allow something to happen. Yeah.
The stage for it. Yeah,
Mm.
I can see that. Actually, the work that you did the works when they were displayed in NTU, where the space itself was a lot of glass, light could really reflect it on the works and the shadows. So it's added another layer to it.
So the whole spatial installation is the work, and the paintings is sort of like allowing the experience to happen.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Or
Yes.
have gone. Okay, there's another one here. Sorry, I can't see the whole name, but Do you feel that digital art has lost its aesthetic values? And how are your artworks relevant? How will your artworks stay relevant 5 to 10 years from now? Or 5 to 10 years. So there are two questions actually, but they're related. But you don't have to answer both. Like if you feel more strongly about one question or the other.
I'll answer the second one. So how is your artworks? How are your artworks still relevant?
5 to 10 years from
continuing from the answer from previously, like is the thing that I paint is just a structure. It's just an open-ended space. So I think when you look at it in different time of the days in different years, what you see will change constantly, or maybe after 5-10 years, what you see would change as well. It's like it can also be described like a piece of paper. So today you see a blank piece of paper, you want to create a doodle as a child. So after 5-10 years, maybe you want to create a plan for a building. So it grows with time. So because I don't really put in like a subject, a main subject, specifically a fixed idea of what the painting is supposed to be. It's just like a space for you to react with. So this is how I see it might be relevant after 5-10 years.
Yeah, so to add on to what Kayleigh said, it's we are living in a world where we are going to be creating or leaving behind materials, so even if it's 5 to 10 years down the line, we will still be the materials that we are dealing with are not going to die in a few years time, right? And also because we are people exploring different materials, so as years goes by, and whatever the material that it is present or relevant in that year or that time, probably will be so it's not about the material that we are currently working on. What is our search towards which direction, and what we are going to be doing in the time, in the coming years. I think in that sense, I think our artworks today will be relevant. Yeah,
I agree. I have to agree. And I'm glad that we ended on that. I think we can end on this note because it also kind of looks into the future. So I'm glad that this is kind of like the last question as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're 1 hour in, and that concludes our conversation for the day. Thank you so much, first to the audience for joining us, but most of all to you both for generously sharing your time with us today, Maha and Kayleigh. Thank you so much. And
thank you so much to thank you so much to you guys also for organizing such a great thing, because for artists like us, emerging artists, we sharing our experiences matters a lot. So thanks for this wonderful thing, and also to Kayleigh. I've always admired your works, and thanks to be part of this conversation with me. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. And I really love your work as well. We can do an exchange.
Yeah. we can do a duo later sometime.
That's an interesting concept. And for the audience, if you'd like to, sorry, were you saying something, Kayleigh?
No, it's okay.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, for the audience, if you would like to see the works of Maha and Kayleigh, you can see them on our website, www.gajahgallery.com, and on our social media pages as well. So thank you on Facebook and Instagram.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Good evening.
Good evening.